Welcome to the latest episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. I'm joined with Liz, James, Matt, and myself, Liam. We are having a topic today, or a conversation around a topic of what we learned at Directions, which is the main Business Central conference, which took place last week and middle of November, and for what it means for end users. So there's a lot of techie stuff that goes on at Directions, there's a lot of strategic stuff for the partners, from Microsoft, etc. But we thought we'd try and dissect what we've got, what we saw, what we discovered, and what it means to maybe our customers and other people.
And what they need to know, what they need to
what's
know.
important.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally Microsoft have used it as the way of kind of driving the channel. This is what you should be thinking about. This is what you should be doing. And, I heard it called many times Microsoft Kool-Aid, what they think and what we think aren't always lined up. So yeah, what actions, what have we come back with top of mind kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we had about 3 or 4 days out there, from early in the morning till...
I had a week.
You had a week. You had slightly more responsibility than the rest of us. So what was the first thing that stood out for us, which we think our customers would benefit from learning?
It's all about the Power Platform, wasn't it? We were
So
smacked
all about
in the
Power
face
Platform,
from
yeah.
the minute you got there to the minute you left, about the Power Platform.
But actually that wasn't, the thing that surprised me talking to different partners, and I didn't get to many sessions, but I talked to a lot of different partners from a lot of countries because that was my role there, right? And the Power Platform is not something they have to be convinced to use. They're using it. There's loads of implementations, and they were saying we've got a team, or we've set this up already, or we implement it in this scenario, and so on. So Power Platform is not. It's on a roll. It's out there. It's being used seriously, consistently across lots of different partners and lots of different countries.
And I guess to clarify, what is the definition of the Power Platform?
It's a good place to start, yeah.
In terms of for our customers, so there's a database called Dataverse, and that's traditionally what CRM has used as its database. That is now available to create our own tables, fields, linked to BC.
And all this is in the cloud, right?
So database is just a database in the cloud.
It is. Then you've got, from a reporting perspective, hopefully everybody knows about Power BI. So BI reporting tool you have, which we'll come on to. Power Apps, so applications that you can build that you can then run on your mobile phone, tablet. Power Automate, so workflow tool. Again, all of those living in that environment have access to how many connectors now? It seems to go up every week.
Hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah.
So that is kind of the ecosystem, and BC is kind of part of that now.
So, you said hopefully everybody knows about Power BI, and I think that's one of the challenges we've got, to be honest. People do know about Power BI, but they know about Power BI 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we kind of went, oh, isn't this fantastic? And the front end was, but you didn't have access to the data. And I think that's actually... one of the exciting things about the whole Power Platform is not the Power Platform itself, it's the fact that BC now, Business Central, supports what the Power Platform needs to make the integration much smoother, much easier. The kind of...
Which is APIs, right?
That's technology called APIs.
The way that the data gets from BC to wherever it needs to go. So let's assume the database is
and the
going to be
performance
APIs.
of that, and the virtual tables, so you can access the data without actually moving. The fact that you insert a record in Business Central from the Power Platform, and the events kick off, and all the little nuances that have kind of been gotchas in the past are slowly getting solved. I'm not saying every single one, and there's one big kind of elephant in the room that we probably need to talk about kind of reliability and how you redeploy, but you can build a solution now which is pretty rock solid, performs well, and actually is better than building a whole set of solutions in Business Central for a whole bunch of reasons.
So I think then the key thing for customers is to for us is to work out now what sits where. When there's a requirement, whether it's a a requirement that reoccurs, so something that we do frequently and that we will come up with a solution for that we can just deploy to multiple customers, or whether it's something that's very customer specific, how we decide which parts of the solution to do. Now, we've said for years and years and years, keep everything in one place, one system, one place. Actually, that's not quite the case anymore. Things have evolved here, and actually your data is more and more important, but by being able to easily replicate it, not recreate it, replicate it in Dataverse or wherever it needs to go, can give you lots of improvements around things like performance, and if you want to be able to do data warehouse or all those kinds of things, it's much easier to do, which means that yes, your data will be in more than one place.
It's not black and white anymore, is it?
No.
Because a Power App, for instance, has offline capability, which you never had with Business Central. You had to have a connection back to your core database. It's an online system, Business Central. Mm-hmm. Power Apps, if you're using it on a mobile device and you've got people out there, that's quite nice to have that kind of offline and sync capability. Yeah. But that introduces a whole set of kind of, when's that data going to sync? Has it been changed in the meantime?
Yeah, who's master?
Yeah. So with every advantage comes, in effect, complication in some respects. And I'm still of the view that the simpler you can keep your system, the better it is, and the more reliable it's
likely to be,
and the less money you'll spend on it.
The right tool for the right job.
It is, and so it's looking at all the kind of pros and cons and making a judgment about, okay, this is there. And I know Matt and I would probably, in some instances, come to a different conclusion. I think your instinct to use Power Automate, for instance, is far more better, and that's probably because you've spent far more time looking at it than I have. So it's confidence.
And there's been some improvements in the latest version of BC, so that from a lot of the pages within BC you can run a Power Automate specific to that record, and that adds some nice functionality for users. That they can go and create their own stuff as well.
Can I make a controversial statement? I'm not sure is correct, that this Power Platform and all of this stuff only really applies if you're on SaaS.
I was just about to say exactly that. Yeah. You're reading my mind. I was just about to say exactly that.
If you're if you're on-prem, you've got to set up gateways. You've got the level of complication to try and sync in your on-prem data.
This conversation is
quite
a lot of it just isn't supported on-prem.
Yeah,
you might get it to work. You might get it to work, but
working reliably is a separate thing.
And then plus every time there's an update on one part of it, then it's just not worth even trying. If you're not there yet.
All the controversial statements you said, I don't think that's what I do. Normally I go into a full-on meltdown. Do you mind if I say something controversial?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely spot on.
Much more controversial come from your mouth. So it's not. I think that is. I think that's definitely.
I'll kick it up a notch, and
I think there's also been some licensing changes as well that's made Power Platform more affordable. Power Pages, Power Portals, so the ability to create in effect an external facing web page looking at BC, CRM,
collecting your data, displaying your data.
So a supplier portal is the one that always jumps to mind with me. The cost of that has come down significantly. And it was before.
Yeah, because you haven't got to think about the number of users that are connecting to that data. Because they're all coming through.
Yeah. So that's the one of all the Power Platform. I mean, Power Apps, yes, I get it, and in the right set of circumstances, we built some great Power Apps for customers that have got very specific requirements. The duck one and the lobster one and the garage door one.
And I don't know how to be animals related.
Yes, well, garage doors isn't really animals, but but those, if you catch lobsters and sell them, that's a pretty.
It's quite niche.
It's quite vertical, isn't it? Those are very specific and one-offs, and I think. Where the Power Platform, I think, has still got a bit of maturity. The whole productization, if that's a word, of Power Platforms. So, that there are applications I can see us building Power Apps for, which we will want to deploy to
To multiple customers.
And it's that whole piece of, if your BC system died and we had to rebuild it, potentially with the kind of whole DevOps process now, we could do that in a matter of minutes. If with all of these different components on the Power Platform and the connectors and configuring those connectors and the
bit more manual, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've got to, so somebody's got to go through and put that back together. And with monthly updates, or potentially more often than that, you have got a few instances that could go wrong, and so you better have somebody who knows what they're doing on hand to put it right if you're relying on it on a minute by minute basis. Mm-hmm. So that production critical, and when I say production critical, I'm thinking of the shop floor where, if this doesn't work, the shop floor stops. I'm still on the fence a little bit about whether Power Platform is in a position where I'd want to trust that.
Or you need a good plan B.
Yeah, you need a fallback.
Yeah. So I went to one session where they had just that, but they also had an emergency app. So if connectivity, etc., went down, they also had pre-built another app which was local, which could work offline, which they could at least continue the basics and then catch up afterwards. Costs more to do that, obviously.
I was going to say, there's double your costs, really.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep both updated
But if it's a BC screen and your internet goes down, you've got the same problem.
You have, yeah.
So you're actually better off in that scenario.
I mean, one of the questions I've got is kind of, how do you know it works? How do you know it's going to work? And there are lots of business critical applications that we built where, if this doesn't work and it doesn't work reliably, we can't ship product to customers, and that costs us money, and it gets the dial starts going around very quickly in terms of the way it builds up. So that the kind of testing tool set, the ability to go, that works. The ability that we have on BC now to say, okay, we are going to deploy the update to this platform overnight tonight, and we have ensured it works, so we can, tomorrow morning, we know it's going to work. Mm-hmm. We don't have that kind of capability Power Platform side, do we? I haven't seen it.
There's telemetry you can get, but
that tells you it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which is great. At least you know it doesn't work, but it doesn't tell you, you can't do that kind of whole test and deploy cycle, I think, in the way that you can with Business Central. And so that for me is, that is one of the factors about whether I would architect an extension to BC where I can do that and test that, or whether I build a solution that goes off into...
There's a support challenge for us as well here, isn't there? Because if we deploy an app in BC, the chances are only our developers and our support team will make changes to that app and deploy them. If we deploy things that use it using Power Apps, then the customer has free reign almost to go and modify.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to become more...
which is great. And one thing I've noticed is the learning resources around it are really, really good.
Yes.
So if you are that way inclined, you could probably quite easily teach yourself how to modify a Power App. If you've got that integration in place and there is a knock-on effect, we have to think about how we can support that.
With
and how
great
we can
power
make sure.
comes great responsibility is a phrase I've used on this podcast a few times before, I think.
But it's so much easier to do it within a Power App, let's say, than it might be to do it within Business Central Code.
I think with Power Apps, though, we've kind of learnt this, that on the surface it looks easy. Yes, we can go and do some stuff, but when you start to scratch the surface, it gets a lot more complex.
Yeah, but if someone scratched that surface and made a complete mess of it,
absolutely.
But that's where they have to understand the responsibilities.
So I think,
but it's tempting.
We have to be very clear about about what we are able to support, where customers go off and do their own thing when it comes to Power.
To some extent, and the Power Platform isn't a single thing, is it? So, if you're if you're taking a bunch of data out and into Power BI and producing something that, I don't know, reports a wrong number or whatever, yeah, it's a wrong number. As long as people recognise it's wrong and it doesn't mean you make the wrong decisions, fair enough. And kind of there's a very clear line of responsibility. I think, for me, it becomes a whole different ballgame where you're feeding information back in. So if you're building Power Pages or a Power App that creates journals back into your BC system, then hey, a financial transaction might result and kind of then, there's a reason why even with pen and paper, auditors existed, because in effect you need to make sure that there's a validation process to make sure that's right. And by the way, the one thing that's changed from the pen and paper era to the Power Apps era is that the pile of wrong transactions that you can do in a Power Apps era is distinctly higher than the pen and paper era.
Yeah,
On the Power Apps, are we saying now that Power Automate is the workflow tool of choice? Or there used to be like a...
As opposed
I wish
to...
it was.
Well, there used to be various ISVs or a few ISVs that had solutions for workflow into BC or NAV as it was. Yeah. Is Power Automate the place that we would start now if we got workflow?
It's the
it should start.
Yeah.
And the workflow that's built into BC, I hope it dies, because it's fiendishly complicated, not very good. People are still using it for things like approvals and so on, because it was the only option they had a few years ago. But it's let's be frank, it's rubbish. But
that's the type of evolution we're seeing with the Power Platform, that Microsoft have, rather than recreating certain tools for a particular product, they're creating more of a generic one that will sit into a lot of their products.
Yeah. And I think that's lovely. The fact that it's kind of coming out of Business Central, going into Power Automate Flow, and then back into Business Central for something like approval of a new customer or a new item. Designing that workflow of what your approval process is, brilliant. Power Automate's lovely for putting that together. You're still making sure then that two systems. So if for whatever reason, if say the authentication of Power Automate into Business Central, that the token expires or whatever, it can't connect, suddenly then your workflow's broken, and that's where you need to know that's broken, because that type of thing can be broken for a significant period of time before anybody realises. And that's where you get the problem, because this wasn't working, it should have been, and now it's you got a whole bunch of problems. So look, I think it's fantastic, but it's not as mature yet as I think it's getting there. It's not far off now. It's a hell of a lot better than it was 2 years ago. But is it where it needs to be? Not totally.
I don't know if there's some nervousness there, James, from you. There's using the new technology. It's I'll probably jump in maybe a bit too 2 feet first with this.
Yeah, I think it's great when it works.
I had a customer where we had a couple of Power Automates running, and it was doing quite a high volume of transactions, and it ran, we've moved over to a different solution now because they've changed their business, but for 9 months that just ran without a single error, just kept on going.
So what else we got then?
Well, I thought just following on from there, we had the integration with Teams. So we're talking about data coming out. That was quite that idea of collaborating with your colleagues, other parts of the business that are using Teams. Microsoft are now allowing you to drop that data in. I know that they've been doing that. It gets a little bit better every release, but they did announce that if you're on Office 365 is now Microsoft 365. They've rebranded everything. But if you're on certain of those licenses, you can consume that data without needing a BC license, which was quite nice. If you want to share small amounts of cards from BC into Teams. So
going to be controversial again. So Microsoft are allowing you to consume your own data. Great. Nice one, Microsoft. Whose data is it exactly? It sits within Business Central, but it is the client's data. So I don't think they're doing, I don't think they're doing an ultimate favour.
No, but I mean, historically, Microsoft will charge you for any tool or app that they can license in some shape or form. They'll charge you the pound of flesh for it. So
you can, because they've had card views for a couple of versions now, but now you can expose a list of data into Teams.
Finally, yes. That's useful.
Worst case, you could have done that with a BC Teams license, so you just don't need that. A BC Team license.
It's a list with a defined filter as well, isn't it? So you can filter in the list of what relates to that team. Which I think is really, for me, it's kind of, that's really useful, and that's something that most customers would probably find it useful.
Okay, well, that was just a very small thing that, again, just a slow evolution.
And you're right, Liam, the licensing, is, I was being provocative.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. I think it is good that Microsoft have taken the more enlightened view. They could have very easily gone another way and tried to monetize it.
Don't worry, they'll find something else. There'll be something else.
Well, yeah.
What about the telemetry? Because there was a lot of sessions, wasn't there, around telemetry, and some at partner level, which probably a customer doesn't need to worry about too much. But actually, there was a whole session on how a customer can use telemetry.
We've got the performance profiler now in BC. That's, if there's any performance issues, then customers can
which is
look at that.
Which is the single most annoying support call, because you can guarantee that the minute you start looking at it, everything works fine. It's one of these, like when you call somebody else and you go, or your car, when you take your car into the garage and the noise doesn't work. It doesn't happen when you take your car in. But with the profiler, you can get that, you can see exactly what happened and when, can't you? You've got that information. You can start to log.
The tool set around performance that we've got now is way, I think, better than we've ever had.
Yeah.
And with the amount of data they're capturing over historic, that was always the thing with the on-premise systems, is performance was bad yesterday, it really slowed us down.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do anything about it yesterday because we haven't turned it.
And we
don't have the data.
Used to put a SQL profile on, which used to slow it down.
Yes. And so, with the telemetry, we have got the chance of going back, looking at stuff and kind of pulling out what was going on at that particular point in time. So I think it's only the start of the telemetry journey, and it's interesting that Microsoft have been banging the drum around this for 3 years. Kenny's been bugging us all around, you should look at this, you should look at this. I think now partners have caught fire with it and understand the potential now. Are we exploiting that potential? Not fully, no, nowhere close, but we're getting, we were doing it we were here, just before we went away, weren't we, for one particular customer, and that 7-8 o'clock at night where we have to fix this by tomorrow kind of situation. Telemetry really helped with that. So
it would have been really difficult with
yes,
really difficult.
Well, it would have been kind of speculation, wouldn't it?
As well as the performance stuff, I sat through one session. They were saying what it can mean to an end user. I think from an account management or customer engagement point of view, and they were saying if you're going into your customer, use telemetry and explain to them what areas of the system they might not be using. So, in terms of core product, if they're not going in there, the telemetry will tell you. If they've had maybe some development work written and you've deployed some extensions within, it's not being used. Why you asked for this to be done. Are people not aware of it? Have we not educated people? There was looking at the clients people are running on. Again, if maybe one of the goals had been to have something where you were more mobile, if no one's logging on, it's not being utilised. So your salespeople or people on the road might not be using it. So there's quite a lot of stuff in there that gives an insight to customer. I don't think it's groundbreaking, but it's again a nice way of thinking of what else telemetry can be used as well as support and performance related. There's a hell of a lot of information in there which you can take in, how a system is used. So when people are saying it doesn't do this, that or the other, you can go in and say, well, you've not used a quarter of your system.
I mean, the reports that we developed within Business Central, over the years you've developed lots of reports which have probably never been run.
Or been run in one scenario because they were a reaction to a particular thing and they just sit there forever. And you end up maintaining them because you're not sure whether anybody uses them. And so having that situation where you can actually say, look, this is when it's run. So things like that, fantastic. I think isn't it hard to keep up? It's and when you're in a customer engagement, when you're talking to a particular customer, I think it's really hard to kind of bring all of these aspects in. The pace of change is as fast as it ever was.
I mean, it's nice that Microsoft are actually pushing out, like different layouts for telemetry, so they are thinking about what people
Power
might
BI
want.
dashboards,
Yeah, so you haven't got to design everything yourself or come up with the idea. So it's nice that there it is, and they're taking the feedback. If you think of something, you mentioned Kenny, the guy who champions this. He said, "Email me, I'll add it in." So it's great to have that.
He published a new version of the dashboard yesterday, which from some of the questions that it was a beta version of something, because he got some feedback from the Directions conference last week, and
so customers have got a Power BI dashboard that they can use for their own telemetry if they want to.
Yes.
So a lot of customers might not realise that that's available to them.
And I think there's a lot of customers which probably would look at that dashboard and go, "Why? I have no clue what that means," and all the rest of it. And that's the role that a partner play. We as a partner play for a lot of them, where we are their experts.
Yeah, but there's some that do.
But
there's some do want that level.
Yeah,
would
the
like
self-service
that level of detail,
people.
and we do want to be able to be very self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And you do see a lot of this, where tools that partners have had or functionality that partners have had eventually do go downstream, and the end user starts utilising them once we become comfortable and know. So, which is always good for certain customers. Not everyone's going to be benefits from
It's
that.
been interesting as well how Microsoft are using the telemetry to look at how people are using BC on SaaS, and I think that's given
Wow, hasn't their attitude changed over
it's
the
kind
last
of like,
5 years?
oh, that's how it works. That's how
Yeah.
people use it, or
Yes.
don't use it as we expected. It's like, why aren't people attaching pictures to customer cards? I wonder why. They're kind of got into the real world, I think, from telemetry.
Where in the real world, obviously, everybody has ugly customers, and you wouldn't want the pictures
that's
attached.
true.
But yeah.
Except Tecman. All Tecman customers are great for those that are listening. Yeah.
Speaks to sales director.
Yeah. Talking of sales, the one thing I saw, which sounds great from a sales perspective, I'm going to throw it out to I know Matt's had a little look at this, but they were talking about reporting within Excel, which sounds obvious, Excel reporting, but from when we're talking to opportunities, talking to people looking at Business Central, or even talking to customers, this sounds fantastic. And I remember when they did this with Word, that you could do your own document designs within Word, and it never seemed right at the beginning. It sounded a great concept, but didn't work quite as well as it probably should have done. Reporting with Excel.
Yeah, I mean, in effect, when you run a report in BC, traditionally, let's say, I don't know, customer top 10, classic one. You can put it into Word, into PDF, into Excel, in terms of exporting that data, and it looks just like the report layout that you've just created, the standard report layout in there. Underneath, there's a whole set of data that's generated to create that information. So,
Well, that's what it does first, doesn't it? Creates a report data set.
puts the data and then kind of puts it into the format that the layout has. So now we've got access to that kind of raw data. So you can run a report and it push it into a table in Excel. So in effect, you can run the report, export it to Excel. So you've then got a one tab with the data set, and you can then create some other tabs. And this is just an Excel functionality.
With your charts and your pivot tables and your
doing lookups, VLOOKUPs,
Yeah.
lookup. There's some great tools now with
And
Excel.
then
Only
you just
using
save
it the
it
last couple of
back,
weeks for a
can't you?
form, and actually populating in effect a form on tab 2 and tab 3 and tab 4, and then effectively people are filling in that form, and you can bring it back the other way, which is
You save it and then you just refresh it then, don't you, rather than having to recreate
So
the
once
whole lot.
once you've done that and you've saved your report, you then go back into your custom report layout, suck it back in against that report, and then when you run that report again, your customer top 10, it's an option on your layouts, and you can have multiple options to choose from. So, there's some nice uses. You've got to have the data set there.
How many times has people copied and pasted it to Excel and then pivot tabled it and do that? You could save time.
it's
Well, it
something
just
you want
means
to
that
repeat.
you're setting up that second layer. It's almost like a macro that's doing that second stage, which automates it. So, I think, I would expect that the majority of management reports that we're generating from BC in the future are done, the layout's done through Excel, because I think, the number of times the RDL layout, which is the real alternative, that's not simple, is it? That's a developer task, and it's quite assessed.
Even
But
the
it's
developers
pointless.
don't like it,
No.
do they, really? Let's be
How many
honest.
years since we've written one of those? A layout of a report that stays the same, and I typically run it, print it, there it is, people don't want that.
No.
People want the data to go
and
analyse.
data
data
lives,
do what
so
they want,
you know
yeah.
they'll want that report to evolve, and this just puts them in control. So we're giving them the data. So construct the data set, which actually is the easier part of the reporting challenge. You know, throw it out to Excel and let the client then decide how they want to lay out, and the performance over and above. So Jet is the other option that people have historically used for this. But the problem with Jet,
do you need that?
well, Jet, you know, so you're laying out that kind of report, the sheet with the data on, and you're using Jet. Jet goes and gets each individual cell of data, kind of the way that works, and the performance impact of that is way higher than what we're doing here. So.
Yeah, I would say that in a lot of cases as well, our customers using Jet reports that you could create out of the box in these.
Well, I think
there's some that not. There's some that are much more complicated than that. In which case, should there be in a Jet report anyway? But I would say a lot of them they use it because they can pre-format it and they can just refresh it rather than having to recreate it.
Particularly where there's a lot of data. I mean, when Jet was always the nightmare was where they tried to report across, for instance, all of their item ledger entries.
Yeah.
You know, because in effect the filter was done the Jet side, the Excel side. So the amount of data that was coming into Excel that to then in a lot of instances get discarded could be huge unless you were very cute about how you wrote the report. This is constructing the data set on the BC side with an optimal query, so you know as efficiently as possible, and then throwing the data that's required into Excel for formatting. So I think that's the key difference. It's a much more efficient process. If you just want one number out of BC, go use Jet to go get that number and bring it back. So if you want a balance on a GL account or a balance on a particular customer, probably that's the best. Use Jet to go get that. But people don't. What they do is they end up misusing Jet by saying, right, I want to, sum every item ledger entry I've done in the last 3 months or whatever, something like that. And
this is slightly off on a tangent, but it is still exceptionally difficult to get a proper margin report using all the tools that we've been given. So if you look at the standard APIs, yes, we've got the sales transactions, yes, we've got the credit note, so we can get the sales price, but you don't want to use the cost off the sales lines. Yeah. You need to go to the value entries.
Right. Yeah.
You need to go and get the value entries, and you can't do that still. There's still a hole there. So whatever tool you are using...
Well, that's the challenge for us, to build a set of reporting that provides the data that the top client typically will want to use.
So you need something on top of it, because no matter what option you choose, whether you're doing reports out of using Excel, if you're doing Jet, if you're doing Power BI, if you're doing anything else, that is still... how rude.
I know.
Then... that's still a challenge, and this is the problem that you have, is that you need to make sure that the people that are writing the reports understand that underlying data to make sure that data is correct. Slightly off at a tangent, but that's mine.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the kind of the Jet, the Excel layout kind of discussion in terms of the choice between the two. Actually, probably more recently, last couple of years, 3 years, when we've been training customers how to use Jet, thinking more around performance, typically what we've been saying is pull the data into tables, because that's quick, and then have another tab that goes and does lookups and things like that. Yeah, so actually,
you're negating the need for it completely, aren't you? Because you just do it from there.
And where people get it wrong on Jet is where they're doing, NL lookups and they nested, and actually because it goes round each one times that, you can end up with millions of reads,
and it's pulling off a table with a filter that's not indexed, and it's like compound queries, isn't it? Yeah.
So talking about reporting, so you sat in a couple of Power BI sessions. Anything you learned? I learned that I need to go and learn more. I think that's probably fair to say. Some of the data flows with Power BI and the kind of data lake Gen 2 stuff, and that kind of data warehouse stuff, I thought was really interesting, and potentially just
lays nicely on from the conversation where you've got those slightly more complex reporting challenges where you need to link data together and you want to report off multiple tables in one place, that might be a kind of a data warehouse option for a lot of our customers, where they need that also if they've got multiple data sources that they need to pull in. So
I mean, there's still a lot of options out there, isn't there?
It is really confusing, I think, when you first start looking at all the different options for reporting. So I think we have to be clearer about the right tool for the right job, which is, going back to the kind of Power Platform conversation. We have to say, right, if that's the kind of thing that you want to do, this is how you should do it, and this is why. So we kind of almost need to look at, the do's and don'ts of reporting, and that's really
probably
what
every
I've come
year,
away
because
with.
this is
And it
evolving
evolves,
rapidly.
Yeah, exactly. So
what
things
was
that
right
I would
2 years
say
ago isn't
don't
right
do a
today.
year ago, I think maybe.
Well, there's some advanced APIs Microsoft has released now for around financials.
Yeah.
For Power BI, specifically for Power BI, so you can go and point to that, and it's got dimensions.
Yeah,
and,
which is great,
all
but
kind
a
of
lot of our
financial information
customers,
you want.
they can do that. It's the stuff around margin and all those
It's
kinds of things.
operational reporting
The operational
rather than the
reporting
financial reporting.
it is more challenging, I think. I like financial statements, account schedules. We've got like customers that use those really well to get that kind of information. They might export them to Excel, and they'll get some benefit of being able to do the Excel reporting and things we talked about, because it'll save them kind of that reformatting exercise every time. But I think it's the operation side, it's the sales reporting, it's that kind of business intelligence stuff that wouldn't it be great if we could have a live Power BI chart showing the number of picks that are happening per hour per person.
You consider around it. You're right. The reporting around inventory
is non-existent. Non-existent. It's not. It's items. There's no ledger entry or value entry or warehouse entries in the APIs, is there?
Look, if you have
we would have to write
item
those.
ledger entries are there.
Is there ledger entries? Are you sure? There's no value entries.
Yeah, item ledger entries are there.
I think that's our job now to see
and
if
you
we
look
can
at the
fill
supply
those gaps.
chain.
And they might get filled in the future, but for the moment we need those now.
I mean, you look at the supply chain hassles that everybody in the world has had if they deal with inventory, and how many do I need? What's my forecast inventory level? And effectively, you're talking about if you want that off the shelf, you've got to bolt some quite expensive add-ons on top of BC to get that. And that's not just telling me what's my peak inventory, what's my peak demand over the last 12 months, what's my average demand over the last 12 months, just things like that are fairly basic 101 questions around supply chain. What's the currency fluctuations that we've had? What's that done to my cost model? I think there's a whole bunch of reporting that actually we have to get much better.
There is, and the
data's there, isn't it?
It is.
Quite
It's
often
just, but it's such a
with
complex
the
form.
kind of reports that you're talking about, you need them now. It's no good having to put a request in for us and having to wait 6 weeks plus.
The currency
to
has
have
probably
them
gone back the other way.
Exactly. It has to be stuff that you can use to make quick business decisions. So it's no good that if it is a complex, long process to get these reports out. So we've got that's what I've learned. And that's what we've got to work on. I
was talking. We're a professional services firm. I was talking to our bankers about like what forward currency we should buy in euros. That's like, well, how many euros? What have we? What's our euro consumption in the last 12 months? It's like, I have no clue. So, fortunately, I know the data, and I could go and like filter on the accounts and say what's the turnover on each one, and that's what we've that's what we paid out in euros.
Currency reporting.
Yeah, but could
BC,
most MDs and our customers go and do that because they don't know the data in the way that you do?
You've got to understand the data structures.
Exactly. So that's what I liked. Oh, one more thing that I liked as well: the permission. Do you see that?
Yes.
You can
exclude.
It's not exactly revolutionary for most people I know, but being able to exclude rather than include.
I've seen a lot of positive
I
comments
thought
about that.
was that's a real step forward, because it's still, and when I
to be
obviously
clear on
if you're going to migrate to SaaS, you've got to rebuild your permissions pretty much.
We should, I think, BC has changed so much
yeah,
over the years that actually you should rebuild your positions.
You can't migrate your users. You have to set up users again anyway. So you might as well, as part of that exercise, migrate your permissions and use
do your groups. Do your groups properly.
Not field level yet, but I got the impression that might be.
Okay, know about the ask.
I mean, the rules really is that you should use the Microsoft permission sets.
Yes,
because Microsoft update those when
we'll
you
maintain.
So if there's because the problem with that, if we just is if they add a new table, then all of a sudden nobody can use anything because.
But when you build an extension now, you can extend the permission sets.
Isn't it?
So before, when you built an extension, you know, to get it into AppSource, and really best practice was that you created a new permission set for that extension. So you could quite easily have 5 or 6 that related to sales, for instance, because you kept them separate extensions, you had PTs or whatever. And it was really complex. And what do you call them, and how do you know who needs what, and all the rest of it. And so it was a nightmare trying to work out, does this person have access to this? Now you can extend a permission set. So, you know, I'm saying to all our devs, don't create a new permission set because it's just confusing.
It's meaningless.
Go and add it to the standard one.
Bit on top of it, because permission should be done by process,
yes.
not by
yes.
You know, you should. What does this what does this user need to do their job? Not do they need this extension to the next? Because that's just part of the business process.
You know, and the D365 permission sets are a lot better than the historical ones, which are still there. I'm slightly disappointed that Microsoft haven't aligned the permission sets around roles. I don't see the difference. So why would you give somebody a role and not give them the permissions to run that role?
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me at all why you've got security groups and you've got roles. In effect, roles and security groups are the same thing.
I was quite excited. But.
No, it's good. It's a lot. It's massively easy to manage, and you know, yes, you had the effective permissions report for a while now, which you could say, right, this person, what permissions do they get? But then when I don't want them to have access to vendor bank accounts. You couldn't specifically say you don't get access to that. You had to make sure that none of the permission groups they were in gave them access to vendor bank accounts. Right. Now you can just go and say you don't get access to this. Yeah.
But wouldn't it be nice if we could do that at field level as well?
But you
can change anything on the customer card except the credit limit.
Yeah.
There's a question there though that this new feature has come in, and all the customers we got on SaaS, which 3 figures now or whatever it is. The thing about the little incremental changes every month, those new permission functionality. When will our SaaS customers get those? Because when you used to do an upgrade every 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it was kind of, right, this is new, therefore, the reason that upgrade was quite lengthy and involved was that you'd be going over and looking at, right, when we migrate from version 13 to 14, this is, actually 13 to 18, it was probably more closely to the cycle you were doing it. You'd be looking at what's changed and you'd be exploiting it.
Yeah, but in reality, though, James, the like-for-like upgrades was the majority of what people do. They see all the new functionality and they want it, but do they really exploit it? And
all I'm saying is with SaaS stuff, there's a lot of new functionality that's there.
Yeah, but
until you go use it.
Every time there's a major release, if you're on our managed service, then you're getting all this documentation around what's new, and it's targeted at the actual user, so that you can just take, if it's a finance related function, you could just take it and give it to your finance users and they can start to use it. People aren't, we can see how many people are watching this content or reading this content, and it's not enough. Customers aren't taking advantage of the new features, so we're shouting about them and we're doing podcasts and we're telling people, but you can lead a horse to water but you can't make it drink. So we're trying really hard to make sure that customers get this information and can pass it on, because obviously it's the IT manager probably isn't going to be doing the task, so we're giving it in a way that he can then pass that on to the person that is doing it. But I would encourage
It's really
people
difficult
to
though,
do
isn't
that.
it, to justify when you've got something that quote unquote works, to justify
ain't
spending
broke, don't
times to make
fix
it
it.
better. You know, so I do have some sympathy because
I
I've
do
certainly got a
too.
list of those
I do
I'd
too,
like
but-
to do, but I can't get.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
But it's very subtle though, isn't it? Because you get these incremental changes, and you look back 18 months ago, oh, actually, this could make a big
Yeah.
difference to us.
And the point, you know, I made to Microsoft a few times. We had a few closed meetings in effect, and I was like, when you introduce a change, the problem is that the change isn't coming in, and a lot of the changes, bluntly, are not finished. You know, so they come in, and then there's this release of it, and then this release of it, and then this release of it, and actually that process of not quote unquote finishing something before it's launched, I think that's leading to kind of that exacerbates this problem, and I'll explain that why. Because if you spend, you know, if you spend time kind of adapting to the new change, and then pricing, okay.
I was going to mention that one.
Pricing. So they introduced the new pricing model, okay, and in theory, the old pricing model is going to get deprecated. You know, it's in feature management. You can turn it on. I like the fact that they're introducing more control about when you turn the new features on.
Yeah.
Really positive.
When it's something really fundamental like that, it does.
But you know, there are aspects of where the new pricing isn't equivalent to the old. There's some stuff on the old pricing that you struggle to do on the new pricing. For me, I think there's still some work to do on the new pricing to make it as friendly and as capable, to move the dial so it's way better than the old pricing. Now, they've introduced the pricing. We've got some customers that have, you know, we do what I would regard as the right thing, which is, if you're going on to Business Central now, turn all the new stuff on, because it should, in theory, save you. I know. Should save you pain, but
if you go into it new, it's one thing. If you're migrating from something else, then sometimes.
I'm trying to say badly here is, if you move to, you know, they release it, you move to it, and then they release the better version because it's not quite good enough. You've then got a job to move to version 2 and version 3 and version 4. So customers are getting savvy to this, and they're going. My contention was, they're going, well, let's just wait and let's make sure that it's finished before we go through the pain of migrating our business and all the people in our business to this new release.
But those are things that you have to do. I think that the things that are going under the radar are the new little features that are added that people never know they're there, because they never have to use them. They just sit there in the background. So that's where it'd be really good to see our documentation being pushed out to the.
This is a change management process, isn't it? It's
And
kind
I
of
think our
like,
customers
when do you
need to-
jump, how do you do,
need to get on board with that.
What are the priorities and so on, and you know, constant updating means constant change.
It's like the data search feature that came in. You know, you got Alt Q where you can search functionality.
Exactly, yeah.
Now you can go and search for data within bits.
And how many people the end users at our customers will know that? You know, maybe they should be having twice a year meetings with their key users to go through these new changes that they can then push out. Like James said, it's a change management.
And that again that came out. There was no. I didn't see that in any of the docs.
No,
it just landed.
That's the other problem. Yeah, you don't necessarily.
So it landed, and you know, it's there. And then, as it happens, you know, we've got Clever Global Search, which does pretty much the equivalent of what it does. But the problem is, we can't deprecate Clever Global Search because there's about 3 things which it doesn't do. And you know, so do we maintain the 2 things that have a lot of overlap side by side? So change is not easy always, is it? And it does introduce some headaches. And you know, in that particular one, if you're using Clever Global Search, I would say carry on using it, because you're going to go, well, this isn't good enough. But if you're not using Clever Global Search, probably I wouldn't advise starting now. I'd go use the standard Microsoft stuff, because hopefully it will get better. But then it doesn't always, because they're not detailed enough in the roadmap, so you don't know whether they're going to address those gaps and at the time scale they're going to do it on.
It's the agile world, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's constant change.
You get your minimal viable product to begin with, and because Microsoft want to get feedback to see which route they're going to go.
Yeah.
It is, but then when they stick that minimum viable product out into the product and the telemetry says nobody's using it, they go, nobody wants it. In actual fact, the reason nobody's using it is they look at it and go, well, until it does this, we can't use it. And they don't, so that, I know there's a little bit of a gap there, I think, in terms of the BC ideas, has now got so many ideas on it. I think it's become snow a little bit. I don't feel like, for the first time at Directions, every previous Directions for the last X years, they've stood up and they've said, we've addressed the top 92 ideas in BC ideas we've addressed.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that in the keynote this year.
They've got any two the same, just like.
So I think, for the first time that maybe that tells a little story about BC ideas, doesn't it? That maybe they're not looking at it in quite the same way, which is what we told them last year. So
I mean, they certainly react quickly to, if you look at the change they did in 21, which in the background, any field, every time you move from field to field, it's writing back to the database. They got a bit of feedback on that fairly quickly.
Bit of feedback, yeah.
And fairly quickly, there was an update that allowed you to disable it. That's good.
Yes, it was very good that they reacted as quickly as they did.
Why they did it, I'm not sure we've got an answer yet.
and there's so again, sitting with some of the fellow MVPs, we had a long debate about whether actually it's a good thing. Do you want it to save after every field, or do you want it to save at a particular case? Because the business logic of that, particularly in a replication world where you replicate it across, you create a customer after you create the customer number and you haven't got a name yet. And then that's the API can see that and can fire it across.
Yeah.
When you had to fill in a certain, you had to kind of go next record or close the page before it was saved in. That meant it would only be exposed via the API when you got all the mandatory fields that you pretty much want, like posting groups and all the rest of it, filled in. So it is a real change to kind of the way that it works. And feature management, the issue with feature management that I've got is that eventually they become mandatory.
Yeah.
Okay, so just engineering that particular, making sure that doesn't break anything is in all sets of circumstances, and particularly when we're going into this world that we started off with, where it's not BC, it's BC plus all of the other products in the set. How do you make sure that's not something that fundamental is not broken anything? Actually, you could spend several days just checking that still you might not have broken anything, but you need several days just to ensure per client, just ensure that you haven't broken anything. The rapid pace of change is fantastic in some ways. In other ways, it introduces a different set of challenges.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think we've covered the things.
Yeah, well done if you got to the end of that.
Yeah, indeed. I think generally, the high level news was BC's doing really, really well. The product, as you said, continues to have new stuff added to it, functionality, the interface changes.
Every partner I spoke to said demand was off the charts. Its capacity in the channel is one of the biggest issues, and I think there's so much potential out there. It's difficult to exploit. Every client wants to.
So if we've got any end users out there listening who are looking for a change, want to come work for a partner, I'm broke the contract there.
But I
so
think
I never got to this far anyway.
And I can't see that changing, Liam. The phrase you've heard me say many times is, no client ever buys enough efficiency, and that's primarily that's what Dynamics is providing. So whichever, if the economy does go to pot as kind of everybody seems to be predicting, I still think that business systems is a hot place to be right now.
Okay. All right. Well, look, guys, thanks for your contribution. Thanks for your summary of a few days over at Directions, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in and listened. So we'll see you soon on another episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics.